So yesterday, Monday Night Football, what a game it was between the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the New York Giants in a close one, with the Buccaneers winning 25-23. But I'm going to talk about guys' performances and the fantasy impact they had, and let's get right into it. The first guy, Tom Brady. He missed a couple throws early in this game. He was just going out there and just playing, I think. He wasn't really into it that much, Brady. He still gave you a decent fantasy game with 23 fantasy points, 279, 2 touchdowns for Brady, but a couple throws he missed. Him and a few of the receivers, they weren't in sync. He was getting the ball there, but he was holding on too much. That Giant D played pretty well versus Brady and the Bucs, but Brady, he still had a decent fantasy day for you. He didn't totally have a bad game to finish with 23 points. Well, you know Brady will be fine. Now, Godwin will come back, and Antonio Brown, they're saying he's looking good and ready to go for his offense. So, Brady, he'll be fine. A couple guys dropped some balls too. He hit Miller on like a back shoulder throw that he could have caught, but he didn't. Mike Evans dropped a few balls that I thought he could have caught. And then you had guys like Jordan Minkins and the rookie Johnson receiver out there too, which those guys, they're not going to get many reps anymore now with Antonio Brown coming into town and Chris Godwin. So Brady, he had a decent ball game. I'm not going to lie, so I don't have a problem with it. It was a road game. I think Brady, he'll have a big fantasy game versus the Saints in a huge division matchup on Sunday Night Football. The second guy is Ronald Jones, and if I'm a Ronald Jones owner, which I am in 2 leagues, I'm concerned now about what's going to happen with Jones going forward. We saw him come out, he got most of the carries, in all of them, I should say, in the first 2 drives, and then he fumbled is Jones, and then after that we saw him bench the whole first half. After that fumble, after catching a ball on his knees, getting up, and just couldn't hold on, so he fumbled. He was benched by Arians until the third quarter. He came out as the starter again. But it's very concerning. Fournette out-carried him 15 carries to 7, and that's not good. But Fournette, we'll get to him in a minute. So Jones, he ended the day with a bad fantasy day. 7 carries for 23 yards. The 4 catches were good to see, though, from Jones for 23 yards only in the fumble loss. So he had a total of 11 touches was Jones. He looked decent to start the game, but like I said, Arians, he don't play around, and this is a lot of depth this Bucs team has. So once he fumbled the ball was Jones, that was it. He benched him for 2 quarters pretty much, and Fournette got most of the work. But like I said, we'll get into Fournette now, and Leonard Fournette, he finished the day with 10 fantasy points. My points go based on PPR scoring. So Fournette, 15 carries to 7. He also added for 3 catches for 19 yards. So Fournette, he had 18 total touches, but he only had 71 total out of it. But he finished 10 points. He's got the Saints coming up. I think they're going to get to Fournette now. He didn't look that explosive. Only on 2 or 3 runs he did. He was going for more than trying to run the guy over. But Fournette, the bigger physical back, who's going to run between the tackles, and that's what he was doing a lot yesterday. But Fournette, if he's going to be the starter, he's a number 2 running back with maybe low 1 upside, the way he could explode and win games for you in fantasy. Because last year, this was a great fantasy running back was Fournette. He had 1,100 yards and 76 catches. So Fournette, he's capable, obviously, of being a workhorse. He was a first-round pick in fantasy a few years ago, and now with this Buc offense, the box won't be stacked that much, especially with Antonio Brown and Chris Godwin there, and Mike Evans. And the next guy we'll get to is Mike Evans. Mike Evans, he's been struggling most of the season. Touchdowns have saved him, and once again, no Chris Godwin in the lineup. The touchdown saved his production. Mike Evans, 5 catches, 55 yards, and a touchdown. But most of the game, again, it looked like him and Brady weren't in sync, and they weren't until that little fade route in the back of the end zone for a touchdown on 7 targets. He did catch 5 of them, though. But just to me, watching the game, Evans and Brady, they're not 100% coexisting and got that chemistry. We saw Brady with other receivers too. They're not on the same page. But Evans, he still went out there and gave you 16 and a half. And that's not that bad. That's number 2 receiver production. And that's what he's been most of the year. With 3 dud games for Evans and the 5 other ones pretty good with 15 plus fantasy points. But now with Antonio Brown into this offense and Chris Godwin, I expect him to come back in week 9 or 10 with a broken finger. Evans, his production could go down because in 2 games this year with Godwin there, he had 2 points and 5. So this is going to be a lot of targets taken away from a lot of guys. This offense, the ball's going to spread out all over the field because they're going to have 6 or 7 great options on that offense. So we'll see what happens and how it shakes out with Brown and Godwin. The next guy is Rob Gronkowski, and once again, the Gronk, I said start him for sure this week, and he didn't disappoint with 14 fantasy points, 4 catches, 41 yards, and a touchdown. Gronk, he was a blocker for most of the game in the first half, but then he came out in the second half, had that nice touchdown off a deflection, and somehow the ball still got to him, and he held on. We saw him with a seam route up the middle. But like I said, Brady, he was holding on to the ball a lot. There was a play earlier in the game where Gronk had one-on-one coverage, and he did like a deep slant, and he was wide open, but Brady didn't get him. Well, that would have been a touchdown too. So Gronk, he's got a good role in this offense. He only had 4 catches, but caught all 4 of his targets. So I think Gronk's going to be fine. He's going to get you 10 to 15 a week, even with Brown and Godwin. So yeah, Rob Gronkowski, I don't have a problem with him, and I'm going to keep rolling him out there. He's a top 8 tight end, maybe even 5 as the weeks are going to go on here. And now let's get to the Giants side of things. We're going to start off with Sterling Shepard, and he had a good ball game with Sterling Shepard. A couple clutch catches also in that drive where the Giants came down and tried to tie it. But Daniel Jones, he's just looked bad, man, with his receivers. He didn't do much, and he missed Sterling Shepard on one deep ball where Shepard would have had a monster performance, but he finished the day with 15 points, 10 targets, 8 catches, 74 yards. He seemed like a security blanket for Daniel Jones with Shepard. He looked pretty explosive. Like I said, he had one-on-one coverage most of the night, and Jones missed him on a deep ball. Just Jones, he holds on to the ball too long, and that's the problem. We saw that also at the end of the game where he had Dion Lewis in the flats to try to tie the ball game up on a 2-point conversion. But if he didn't hold on to the ball and throw it earlier, that game would have went to overtime. But anyway, Sterling Shepard, he's a low-end 2 to flex receiver. He's getting the targets now in the last 2 weeks. Last week versus Philly in his return, he had 8 targets for 6 catches, 60 yards, and a touchdown. So in his 2 games back, that's 18 targets for Shepard. The Giants' schedule is getting easier. He's back in the offense. You know the Giants are going to throw a lot. They're 1-7. They're going to be trailing in a lot of games. So I like what I saw from Shepard. The next guy is Wayne Gallman. And Gallman, he looked explosive. Just the only thing, the Giants didn't give him the rock that much. He only had 12 carries for 44 yards and a touchdown, and his only catch for 18 yards. But Gallman, this is a guy they should be using more. I don't know why Alfred Morris, who they signed off their practice squad, when he appeared, I'm like, wow, this guy's still around. I didn't even know he was still in the league. But anyway, Gallman, 11 carries he had, and Morris had 8. So that's not a good sign if Gallman remains the starter. But if Freeman comes back, what's going to happen? So this backfield is a fantasy mess, in my opinion, for the Giants. When Freeman comes back, then you got Freeman, Gallman, Lewis, and Morris. And speaking of Lewis, too, we'll do a quick one on him. Lewis, he had a nice catch over the shoulder timing route for a touchdown, but he's got no fantasy value. He didn't get 1 carry at all. He's just a third down or back to give someone a breather. He had 3 targets, 2 catches, 8 yards, and a touchdown. But yeah, Dion Lewis, you don't want him in fantasy. He's 4% owned for a reason, so stay away from him. So the next guy, Darius Slayton. And Slayton, I said bench him on 5 receivers to bench coming into the week. And Slayton, he had a mediocre game, 10 points, 5 catches for 56 yards. But I like the target usage again, 9 targets And like I said, their schedule is going to get easier. So Slayton, he'll be a start at the flex in the next few weeks. But once again, Daniel Jones, he missed Slayton on a couple deep balls in this game. He got 9 targets and only caught 5 of them. So Slayton, he could easily had a 100-yard game and a touchdown. But Jones holding that ball, I sound like a broken record. But he couldn't get the job done with Slayton. Slayton easily could have had 20 fantasy points. But I like his outlook for the rest of the year, Slayton. He's still the number 1 there. Shepard's a decent 2 there, but the problem with Shepard, I can't trust him every week, and plus the injury history, I expect him to get nicked up again. I'm not wishing on anyone, but that's just what happens with some guys. They're just injury prone every other week. Evan Engram, he was a guy I said last week to drop, and if you didn't, good for you, because Engram, he had good tight end numbers, 5 catches, 61 yards on the night, and he just missed a diving play into the end zone where he was out of bounds at the 2, and he also had a rush again for 9 yards. It looks like a rush attempt every week they're giving Engram on an end around or whatever. But Evan Engram, he had a good game, 12 fantasy points. That's very solid from the tight end position. And now in his last 2 games last week, he had 6 for 46 and also 2 carries for 3 rushes. And now in his last 2 weeks, Engram, he's getting the target work, 19 targets in his last 2 weeks with 10 in this game. So Engram, if he's out there, he's available in 22% of leagues. So if he's available in your leagues, which is slim, it looks like that number, go out there and get him, because the tight end position each and every week is getting weaker. We saw George Kittle go down with a broken foot. His season's over. So yeah, Ingram's a good replacement for Kittle, or you could even go out there and maybe trade for Engram. I don't think you got to give up that much. So this was the fantasy review with the Bucs and the New York Giants on Monday Night Football in Week 8.